Virtually every gay dad in North America knows Brian Rosenberg's name. And truthfully, the majority of the queer community in North America who want to become parents is learning his name, is learning about who he is, what he stands for, and what he does. Sure, he started out with Gays with Kids, but he has evolved his work and he has grown it into a nonprofit organization, GWK Academy, and he's really all about supporting any queer individuals who want to become parents and throughout their parenting journey. He is my guest today on the Becoming Baby Ready podcast, and I am honored to have had the opportunity to chat with him so that you could listen. Welcome to the Becoming Baby Ready podcast, your podcast for queer family planning. My name is Sam, and throughout this podcast, you'll hear me have conversations with professionals who work alongside people who want to start and grow their families, as well as parents of intentionally created families. Everyone I speak to identifies as being part of the 2S LGBTQIA+ community. This is your opportunity to learn answers to questions you didn't even know you had. Welcome, everyone. Today, I am chatting with Brian Rosenberg, and this is a name that I'm very confident you already know, but just in case you have been hiding out somewhere and just crawling out today to listen to the episode, I'm going to ask you, Brian, to please tell everyone who you are and what you do.
Sure. Thank you so much for inviting me here, Sam. I'm so excited to have our chat with you. My husband Ferd and I have 3 children. We created our family through a combination of adoption and surrogacy. We found out about Levi when he was 3 days old. We brought him home from the hospital 2 days later. Now today he's 16 years old. He's bigger than me. And then Levi has twin sisters, Ella and Sadie, who came to our family through surrogacy. I like to share that I'm the biological parent of the girls, and the only reason I do share that is because I'm also HIV positive, and I have been for a long time. In fact, I became positive before I met my husband, and he and I have been together for 32 years this month. And that way, in case anyone listening is also HIV positive or perhaps living with some other long-term illness, that they know that that does not preclude them from becoming a parent either through adoption or biologically. Yep. So I would say my whole thing was when we were going through our adoption surrogacy journeys, it felt like there were no resources available, right? Like, you know the story. And especially for someone living with HIV, there were even fewer resources available.
Right.
And so I remember we were going through the motions, trying to find the right people to talk to and inclusive and welcoming family building partners and also ethical and, and I don't think honestly that we made a single decision either for our adoption journey or our surrogacy journey feeling really confident about that decision. And that by and large left me after we had 3 kids under the age of 2. So we were kind of busy for a few years. But once the kids were out of diapers and Levi was in pre-K and the girls were eating solid foods, I really said, I want to help others become dads. I want to help HIV positive guys become dads, but just in general, I want to help others become dads. Because I knew that lesbians have been creating families, for a long time.
Sure.
And so eventually we launched Gays with Kids. And Gays with Kids was meant to help others become dads and navigate to the gay and gay parenthood. But after about 6 or 7 years, I went about doing that by sharing stories primarily. And so over the years, we shared, hundreds and hundreds into thousands of stories, mostly anecdotally from the viewpoint of the dads. So you would get information, stories that made your heart beat and maybe inspire you to want to become dads. But what I realized after several years is that these stories didn't help you become dads.
Right.
So you're still left on your own. And so eventually we created something called GWK Academy, which was meant to help people become dads. And I'm super proud and excited to share that in February, GWK Academy was spun out of Days with Kids. It is now its own independent nonprofit entity, and we've expanded our services to support family building for all LGBTQ plus people for all paths.
That's amazing.
I'm the executive director of GWK Academy.
So, can we jump back a little bit? Because I'm a woman of a certain age, grew up in an era when HIV/AIDS was first being talked about
Yep.
and taught about, and everyone was afraid of everything. And honestly, I'm going to say that what 40 years later, we're still talking about it, but there's still an awful lot of fear that surrounds it.
Mhm.
So I can only imagine when you're on this path to creating a family. I mean, you found a partner who was, willing to walk the path of life with you, and the two of you have been together 32 years. So clearly, you're doing something right.
A
But
great cook, and I eat everything he makes me.
there you go. That's
That's
a
the
great place to start. That's a great place to start. But I can only imagine that even 15 years ago, there's an awful lot of people in the family creation world, in the medical establishments, who would still struggle with helping a family be created with someone who is HIV positive because of their fears surrounding the virus and what does this mean long term and everything else. Can you give a brief sort of insight into what you kind of experienced there, but also how you navigated that?
So the reason we navigated is because we were going to have we knew that we just were going to create our family through adoption. Neither Ferd nor I felt the need to have biological children. I was one of those people. I love all my nieces and nephews. I love my college friends' kids. I love the babies I met on the street outside. Like, so I knew I didn't have to have a biological connection to fall deeply in love with them. And then so we started going down an adoption journey, and we were matched with a birth mom who actually she had already given birth, and we got to meet him. After several, I got to actually hold him in my lap for 2 hours.
Love it.
But after a few months, it stretched on for a couple of months, and then the birth mom decided that she did not want to give her child up for adoption, and that was certainly her decision to make, right?
Sure.
And so we said, okay, I guess we're not going to become dads through adoption. We knew that there was something called surrogacy, but I also knew instinctively that I couldn't do it. And so I'm like, first, you'll just do it. It's fine. And he's like, no, let me do some research. And he found that there was a research lab in Massachusetts called the Bedford Research Lab. Dr. Ann Kiesling, at the time, they had been working with, I think they had about maybe 70 children who were offspring of 70 HIV positive gay men, excuse me, HIV positive straight men, and their girlfriends or wives who were HIV negative. And every one of these babies was born HIV negative, and the women all remained HIV negative. So Dr. Kesey in the lab figured out that if you're on meds and you're healthy and you didn't have a viral load, that you could actually become a biological parent without putting anyone at risk. And so we end up trying that. And then it just turned out, ironically, that my husband's little guys didn't swim as well as mine. And so the HIV positive guy became the biological parent.
I think that that's a remarkable story for people to hear because, like I say, there's still so much fear surrounding the words HIV and AIDS that we we automatically assume that that just isn't a possibility. And it's beautiful to see your family grow and thrive, knowing that you have that biologic connection so that it is safe and that your children are born HIV negative and perfectly safe,
And
which
they all know, by the way, so we are firm believers in being very open and transparent and sharing, making sure our children understand the whole family experience. So that even means like that they understand and terms that made sense for them at the time, that one of their dads had something called HIV, and they know that a lot of our friends died from this
Mhm.
early on. For some miracle, I did not. And so, yeah, I think it's really important. Like all of our friends in the suburbs of Boston, or when we lived in Toronto, they all know, like me living with HIV, I'm very, very open about that. Partly because I do want to educate people, and partly because why should I have to hide that? I hid, for years, I hid who I really was. And that was a very difficult, challenging time for me. And so I'm like, no, I'm not going to
Yeah.
hide this. I don't care. If you're not comfortable dealing with it, that's on you, not me.
Right. That's a you problem. Yep, 100%. I love knowing that this is sort of the root of everything for you is learning and educating, whether it's your own children or whether it's people who want to become parents, people who are already parents. This is sort of, I get a sense that this is the essence of who you are at your core, is wanting to just help make sure that people have what they need to be able to do what they feel they need to do.
Well, it's interesting you say that because it was so. I'm not sure if you've ever heard this before because I have not. I came out to my family, to my girlfriend, as having HIV about a year and a half before I came out as being gay.
Okay.
Yes, I know. So, um,
Th- There were some questions, I'm guessing.
there were some questions. I made up some answers and then I just kept repeating those same made up answers. And fortunately for me, it was around the same time Magic Johnson had come out about having it. And so I was like, oh, yeah, it's Magic Johnson and Brian Rosenberg. Um,
The two
so,
of you.
so when I finally became a whole person and had the courage to come out and to live my authentic life, I had a calling. And the first was I wanted to do what I could to help other people struggling with their own sexual identity to come out. And I actually went to schools and high schools and colleges for the AIDS Action Committee Speakers Bureau and talked about what it's like to have to hide something because you're afraid of your friends and your peer group. And so my message was to those people, accept people for who they are and don't make anyone changing for the people who were gay, is just to accept yourself because you're exactly who you're supposed to be and how you're supposed to be. And that got me like, and I loved doing that. And I could see I was having an impact on some people's lives. And the next thing I know, I got a job working at the Fenway Community Health Center, which is Boston's big LGBT center. And I was running their Living Well series program. It was meant to help keep HIV positive men healthy
Mhm.
and to keep, at the same time, to keep HIV negative men negative. Now, remember, this is way before PrEP, right? Like, this is the days they were all having to use condoms. I literally went to bathhouses with one of my colleagues and gave out condoms to people on their own. So they're like,
Yep.
and the more that job, and the family only had a budget to pay me for 30 hours, even though I worked 40 hours. And I did it for 3 years. It was the most meaningful experience I'd had up until that point. And what I do now, and that is what, like, it's like, it's just feels so good when you can help others. And I guess that's really what led me to like be so excited to do GWK Academy.
So you go from this work and you've now got GWK Academy. In the middle, you had Gays with Kids. And did you were saying there were no resources. So how did you come up with a collection of resources to put together for people to access through Gays with Kids?
So when I started Days with Kids, so partly it was because I wanted to help others become dads, especially those living with HIV. But again, we went somehow that was what I wanted to do. But as soon as we started, we're like, let's just get people to share their stories.
Right.
So I I went online, and anyone I could find who was a gay man writing about either creating his family or raising a family, I went after them and I asked them if they would be willing to write for gays with kids and share that. And you know, everyone I asked said yes because it's not like there were a lot of other places to do that.
Right.
And so that's how we started. And I got about, I don't know, 20, 25 bloggers to contribute writing their stories. And, some were excellent writers and some were not writers at all, but they still had stories they wanted to share and they were worth sharing. And eventually, um, I hired writers to tell the stories of the dads themselves. But yeah, I don't know. I remember we got David Blacker came on first, and then I there was this woman EJ Graff who I saw in the Boston Globe. She was writing feature stories that had to do with LGBTQ family building. So I reached out to her and asked her if she could do some stuff for us. I saw David Dodge was writing stories about in the New York Times about he had a regular column about family building. So I reached out to him. And just one after another. And then the other thing I did is because of my own experience growing up and having so much internalized homophobia, I know how important representation is.
Mm-hmm.
So anyone I knew or met who was a dad, I asked them if they could um, provide me with a photo of their family. And it's at one point we had a photo carousel on our website of some 300 to 400 gay dad families. And I'm talking about 11 years ago.
Wow.
Um, and so I just wanted people to be able to go and see themselves there. So that, the, it was the whole depth and breadth of the gay dad community. So there were people of color, there were single dads, there were people in couples, there were older dads, younger, like everyone. They had kids through adoption, kids through foster adopt, kids through former heterosexual relationship, kids through surrogacy. And so I guess my goal is I want anyone who comes to our site to see themselves represented.
That makes it feel like it's relatable, right? That's a beautiful
Yes.
picture about it all, is that you can flip through that carousel and you can feel like, okay, obviously somebody here can relate to something I'm saying or thinking or feeling because I can see them right here.
Oh, so that was it was telling stories. And then I don't know, we were a media company. I call Gays with Kids a media company, but we were a media company without any revenue. And so I just couldn't, and I was one of those, if we build it, the revenue will come later on. Much to the chagrin of my father and brother, who are both very successful businessmen. And I was wrong. The revenue never came. I started to think about, like, what could we do that would be of value, and that would be like something that we really were experts on. And I realized that for like 6 or 7 years at that point, we've been telling so many stories about so many different families created through adoption, through foster adoption, through international adoption, through surrogacy, that sort of we actually just organically we began to know the family building partners who had very great reputations within the gay community. And I was reaching out to them, and then they said, "Yeah, how would you like? What we want to do at Gays with Kids is really focus on building families."
Mhm.
And that eventually became GWK Academy. And so now what we do at GWK Academy is we have the first thing I want to make sure that anyone thinking about becoming a parent knows what all their options are.
Right.
Once they choose the option, the path that's best for their family building, we have courses that will take them through everything I wish I had known about my adoption journey, my surrogacy journey before I got started. Because I don't want anyone to say that they were making decisions about such an important thing, but without any confidence, that they didn't really feel comfortable about the decisions they were making. So I'm a firm believer is if you're educated, then you'll make decisions confidently. And so we have courses that take them through everything. ideally before they start their journey. We also offer coaching calls free. Everything in GWK Academy is free. So like I'll talk to people who are interested either in adoption or foster care or gay men for a surrogacy journey. We have a queer midwife who does coaching calls for women, all people with uteruses who are interested in biological family building. And we have a trans dad who does coaching calls for the trans community. And we have courses for, we don't have courses for everyone yet, but we're building those out. And so that eventually, when we're done with all of our courses, we'll be like one-stop shop we'll have everything you need to know about becoming a parent. And then we're going to move into making that transition into parenthood more successfully, because we're also going to be providing some, and I hope we'll be able to work on that together. We'll also be providing support for people as they transition into parenthood.
And that's a big one, right? I was telling you before we started recording, I was at Family Pride in Toronto a couple of weeks ago, speaking with a couple there who had a young baby on their shoulder, but they're talking about going through the process again. And one of the parents is a trans man, and they birthed at a hospital in Toronto that is typically known for being more forward because it is so scientifically on the cutting edge of things and that type of thing. And they were astounded at how wonderful the support and care was in the trans department of this organization and in the fertility and family creation portion. And then they got to the point where they were having the baby, and that's when there was misgendering and just and so you think, great, we've finally done it. We've started the process. We're expecting, or our surrogates carrying, or a family's chosen us, or someone's chosen us to be the adoptive parent. And then you get to that next step of that transition from baby not being here to baby being here. And somebody really made that so horrible that they now feel as though they have no worries about getting pregnant again or the pregnancy, but they're terrified of the birthing process because it made them feel so awful and unsupported.
And the scary thing is that Toronto's one of probably the most progressive and right, like there's a huge trans parent community there.
Mm-hmm.
I remember when we were living there, and so that just gives me when I think about the rest of the place, like where
Right.
people go when they don't live there, what happened. So yes, agreed.
Hold on for just a moment. We'll be right back.
This episode is proudly sponsored by Limitless Slides, the only performance slide built for mindset, comfort, and recovery. As you know, being two moms, we're always on our feet. Limitless Slides helps us stay grounded in who we are while we're embracing our comfort. They're our daily reset, a reminder of our worth, and what we're grateful for. Grab your own pair at limitlessslides.com and take 30% off with the code 2MOMEDIT.
And we just had a law passed that here in the States that people can opt their kids out of having to read LGBTQ plus themed books at school now. So how is that what's the ripple effect there?
Yeah. If we don't read them, does that mean that it doesn't exist? And if it doesn't exist, then what? It's so.
What happens to our kids? And we're trying to live these openly out and proud lives, and then they know their friends are taken out of the classroom because they're talking about a family like theirs.
It feels like we come so far forward and then we take many steps back, which is, I mean, ultimately where we need organizations like GWK Academy so that people feel, one, that they can get the information that they need. And I do have a couple questions about that I'm going to come back to, but also they can hopefully start to build a network of community within this setting, right?
So important. So it's like more important today than it might have been even 10 years ago when I was going through it.
Yeah. Yeah, I know, I agree. Now, when you're talking about the family building piece and answering the questions or letting people know what they need to know and what research they need to do, my understanding of the rules in the US, and I I'm not a lawyer. I barely know the rules in Canada. So, so I have questions. But I mean, in some parts of the US, some parents I talk to say, we're okay. We've got both of us on the birth certificate. We've been told that that's really all we need to do. We've got other people who say, no, it doesn't matter who's on the birth certificate. You need to do a second or step parent adoption and all of these other things. Do you get that deep into the weeds with people, or do you say you need to have legal representation and so you need to source that out?
Right. No, so we certainly do, but like, especially with things that have been going on here, everyone's asking those questions. And so, yeah, it's great if your kids, your surrogate lives in a state in which you're able to get, parentage on your birth certificate before they're born. But it's true that if you want to be fully legally prepared for anything that could go wrong, then the non-biological parent should absolutely do a second parent adoption. You have to protect yourselves, and that's so that we have attorneys who are part of our family building partner network, and this is the first thing they said when all stuff started to go crazy. But like that probably should have been happening anyways, because some people get divorced, and then it gets really ugly if both parents aren't equally protected. So yes, we should be doing that anyways. It's nice to work in a state that's friendlier for us, but it's also important that you completely protect your family.
But that it's easy. I mean, I say that even living here where things are, two parents on a birth certificate, you're the parents, full stop. That's just the way that it is. But so it's easy to become complacent when you're in a space where it feels like you're safe, right?
Well, but what happened is all of a sudden now, so Ferd and I left. The reason we lived in Toronto is because I couldn't marry him. I couldn't sponsor him when we left here, and he was not able to get permanent residency. And so he lived in the States for 2 years as basically as a vacationer. So he had to leave the country every 3 months to go get his passport stamped, and then come back in. And after he did that, right after Levi was born, an immigration officer said, "I see what you've been doing. This is the last time in 3 months from now, you're not coming back in this country." So we had to figure out, we're going to let him live illegally here. Like we can't do that, especially not now that we're parents. So we ended up moving to Canada because Canada recognized our relationships, even though neither of us is Canadian and we weren't married. And so we moved to Canada and ended up getting married on our 20th anniversary. And then 6 days later, the law started to change here in the States. And so we came back here. But, now I hear all this grumbling, like you got two Supreme Court justices talking about, maybe we should not have done marriage equality. And so people are really concerned, like, could that actually be taken away? And what would that mean for our families?
And that is a big concern. I hear of people that I talk to who are adopting, especially in from the public system in the U.S. And they're one of the things that some of them have been told is that you're a candidate to adopt because you are a legally married couple. If you weren't a legally married couple, you were just living together and you're same sex, you wouldn't even be considered, which is all by itself, that's a terrible. I mean, the idea of the discrimination and being allowed to be discriminated against simply because of who we happen to be sharing our bed space with is mind-numbing. I mean, there's lots of people that I look at and think that's the partner you chose in life, and I'll judge you then if you're going to judge me. But that shouldn't affect whether or not I can be a parent.
Of course, you are absolutely 1,000% correct. But you know what's even makes it even worse? There are 400,000 children in the foster care system in the U.S. Now, the point of the foster care system is that so these kids are taken out either because they were neglected, abused, or the parents couldn't care for them. But the foster care system is supposed to reunify the children, whether it's with mom and dad, or grandparents, or aunts and uncles, or cousins, etc. But it turns out only about 25%, so 125,000 of those kids are what's called, they will never be reunified. There's no family member to take them. And so they become what's known as freed for adoption. So there are 400,000 kids who need placement immediately, and there's 125,000 children who are just longing for a forever family. And how anyone could say better to keep those, and we know what happens to kids who age out of the system. How anyone could say better to let those kids age out of the system without loving parents or a loving parent than to put them in a household with LGBTQ plus parents. I can't fathom.
No, it's appalling. And to say it's disgusting is just the easiest, slightest term you could use for it.
Oi.
Right, right. In Canada, we have a system that in Ontario, the Children's Aid Society calls it the Pride Program, and that surprisingly has nothing to do with being gay, but it's just how it's the name of their program and classes that you take to be able to be foster parents to potentially someday adopt. My understanding is that the program is different from state to state. Is it vastly different in your experience? And so again, how does GWK Academy accommodate somebody from Kentucky who's wanting to learn versus somebody from Missouri versus California versus New Jersey?
So what I say, I don't get like there are places you can go and get like all the different
Yep.
legalese, but here's the deal. 1 in 4 adoption foster agencies, 1 in 4 are LGBTQ plus friendly, accepting, positive, affirming. That's it. So when we started GWK Academy, I'll never forget 2 of the first calls I had, like the first 2 weeks, were with guys who lived in so-called red states, and they thought you just call the agency that's down the block and you work with them. Well, in both cases, the agency that was down the block was not a religious based agency, so they had to take them as clients. However, they were not LGBTQ plus affirming or inclusive. And so they kept these people. In one case, one of the couples was trying to become foster adopt parents. And 2.5 years they were waiting to be placed. And when they go to the agency, the social worker would say, hey, can't promise you that you're going to be placed with anyone. And that's when I went into my whole spiel. 400,000 kids need Ruth Day, 125,000 are looking for forever. Yes, you can be. So what we do is make sure that everyone is working with agencies, whether public or private, that really share my passion, honestly, for LGBT and yours for LGBTQ plus family building. And so we have a network. I don't have and I have we have if we don't yet know someone in your state, we have like 4 or 5 different paths to finding agencies. So my whole thing is I don't want, like, that should never happen.
No.
So come to us. I said, I don't care if you only come to us because you want help finding the right agency or social worker. That is reason enough. Let us leverage our network and get you at least to talk to an agency that's going to really help you build a family.
Yeah. Because it can feel helpless. And as you say, after 2.5 years, you reached out because all you wanted was to become a parent and to help. All in a case of foster parents, it isn't even as much about becoming a parent for many of them as it is to help the children that they know are taking up space within the system that need somewhere safe, loving, caring to go.
1,000%.
So you have resources to connect people as to or direct them where they need to go if they're looking to become foster parents or potentially foster to adopt down the road. And you've got Maria Goodman talking to people with uteruses, and you're getting all of these pieces covered, but there's a cost associated not with GWK Academy, but for the people once they go beyond your spaces. Do you have financial planners or people who sort of map out the money piece for someone so they have an idea what to do?
So first off, I mean, we tell people right early on, like in our courses, or if it's on a coaching call, and I know it's a lot different for queer women build biological family, but for men, I tell them you've got to prepare to spend between $150,000 to $240,000. But we also explain that that does not need to be paid all at once.
Mhm.
You do in key chunks and milestones. I tell people that adoption it's $40,000 to $50,000 for adopting a domestically a newborn baby. If you want to adopt, there are 3.5 countries that embrace gay men and lesbians to adopt. And so it's about the same as you would pay in the States, except you're going to have to pay traveling costs and you have to stay in the countries for several weeks to a month. And then, of course, foster adopt. So there actually is no cost for foster adopt other than whatever you need to have in your house to take care of these children properly. Sometimes you, depending on the state, you may have to upfront some legal costs, but even then, typically you'll get reimbursed those legal costs. So, big pieces of information that you need to know to help you decide which path you're on, and then we can connect. I mean, for surrogacy journey, we have this whole spreadsheet that one of our family building partners put together to help people really keep track of their costs and even to compare costs with one agency against another, or with one IVF clinic against another. So yeah, cost is a huge factor, right, for us. So I don't think we could possibly do it without really having that coverage properly.
And yet I find that that's not all the queer parents that I meet, for the most part, unless they're doing the foster system, and then as you say, you're out of pocket for the physical items you need to purchase, but the other the connections and the legal fees and stuff like that are typically covered. But we don't talk a lot about the financial piece. We just know that it's there. And so when somebody asks how much it's going to cost, and or they think, well, we'll just, we're going to start the process, and then they're asked for $7,000 here and $10,000 there, and their brain starts exploding. Why didn't anybody say this to me? And it's like, oh, how'd you.
That was actually our experience for both journeys. I was having a conversation the other day with someone who asked me, like, what do you wish you had known different for your own journey? And I said, I wish we had understood how much it was going to cost. And I said, then again, if I really understood how much it was going to cost, I don't know if we would have gone forward, because I don't think we could have thought we could have afforded it, and I don't know how we did. And we had help from family, etc., but it was a lot more money than we anticipated. So I'm very upfront about, here's how much it could cost. Here's the wide range, and I know, especially the surrogacy jury, that's a huge gap, right? 150 to 240. But that's because there are a lot of variables involved in the journey, some of which you can control, and some of which you have absolutely no control over. And so I'd rather people be prepared for the worst, and hopefully, and then those who are more concerned about finances than others, I direct them to certain family building partners that I know care more about that than others. And those that don't, they just want to go as fast as possible, well, I direct them to someone else. So everyone's got their own needs, and so that's another part of what we do, is make sure that we don't have a huge network of family building partners by design, because I think people are just overwhelmed with who do you go after. But we have, like, we'll end up having about 15 to 20 when we've got everyone on board, enough to give people choices, but not to overwhelm them, I hope.
That makes sense. I'm a young person. I'm pretending, but I'm a young person. I'm going to the internet, and I type in GWK Academy, and I come to your site for the first time, and I'm thinking I want to have a family. What happens when I come on this site? What do people do first?
So right front and center, we always talk about, this is the place for LGBTQ plus family building. And then we say, here are your 3 paths, your 3 options: adoption, biological family building, and foster care. Foster care is going to come next. So right now we're focused on the other two. When you click on adoption, there are 4 courses. One is domestic infant adoption here in the States with an agency. Then there's domestic infant adoption independent or with an attorney. I don't recommend that, especially not for first time people going through this, but it is an option. Then there's international adoption, and then there's foster adopt. And we have courses that, like, it's a series of videos, right? 10, 12, 13, depending. And they take you through everything you need to know about that journey. And it's not just me saying that. We work with our family building partners, our experts in this. And then if you go to biological family building, you'll see right now the landing page there is here's surrogacy and IVF for queer men, for gay and queer men. Here's biological family building for women / people with uteruses. That's coming soon. We just released our first 2 courses of lessons in that. I'm excited. And then next, when we finish that, we'll go to trans fertility pathways. And then when all that's done, then we're going to have fostering for people who aren't necessarily interested in creating a forever family, but they want to help out. Because as you know, there's so many. We need resource parents. We need people that take so that they can relieve the other foster parents, all kinds of things. So I want to make sure all options are on the table. And then we're adding more courses. So right now we just worked with You Gotta Believe is this amazing, amazing adoption organization in the States. They focus on getting older kids, hard to place kids into forever families. And they have this wonderful thing where it's like, sometimes if it's a 15, 16, 17-year-old, they don't actually want to be officially adopted, or they don't, depends on what happens in their story, right? And so what they do is they have this other contract and that just that they go, they have a whole process by which they take the parents and the children through it. And so that when it's all said and done, regardless of what's going on in the courts, the family has signed a contract together, forever binding contract saying they're each other's family. And it's amazing. And they get these children who would otherwise really not have families. They find them families. Awesome.
I love that. That is a beautiful idea. And I've never even thought of that. But I mean, I think of the older kids who are in the foster system who you hear aging out of the system, but it, there's so few people that you hear talking about being open to connecting with those kids. And and so I love that there's an organization that focuses on the dynamics of that specific need.
So when I got into this and I found out what foster care system is like, especially for kids like that, older kids, LGBTQ plus kids, LGBTQ plus kids of color,
Right.
or even worse, like trans or non-binary kids. Those kids have really difficult experiences. They're placed in places that are not safe for them, not supportive. They have to hide and in a closet, all kinds of things. So I'm hoping that by putting adoption, foster care, biological family building all together, center stage, that people are like, oh, maybe I should find out about that. And somehow, when all is said and done, that I can know that GWK Academy had some kind of small influence in getting more kids out of the system and into loving LGBTQ plus families. That's what I'm really hoping
I
will
love
happen.
that. That's a pretty beautiful image for where GWK Academy can go. I think that's a beautiful image.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm going to let you get back to your afternoon, but before I let you go, the question I love to ask everyone who's on the show who is a parent is, what is your very favorite part of parenting your 3 children? And I don't mean the fact that they've gone away for the summer for a few weeks so that you have the house to yourselves.
Very, very simple, without even thinking about it. I love hugging and cuddling with the kids. Now, They do it less, especially Levi, but like he just went away and I didn't. So he went on a trip with camp. And so we had drop him off at a meeting place where they're all going to go on a bus. And there were all the kids, and the kids' parents were there. I thought for sure he was not going to let me hug him. So as soon as we got out of the car, he gave me a hug. And then we brought him over and walked over the table. And I got a great hug from him. I'm on the kepi, on the head. And so that's great. And Sadie is such a cuddler, and she gives the best hugs. If she sees that we're not happy, she's empathetic. She just comes right over and gives a big hug. And Ella has autism and ADHD and ADD, all kinds of things. But she loves to cuddle with me, especially like in bed. And she doesn't like to give hugs, but she will give them to me. So every time I get and give hugs,
I can relate to that. My two kids are grown. The two eldest that I birthed are grown and they're gone. And when I do see them, they must think that I'm some kind of a parasite that just sort of hangs on to the side of them for the whole time we're together. I fully understand what you're saying. I love that. That's amazing. I want to take a moment to say thank you so much for sharing yourself, your story, and the information about GWK Academy with me and with my listeners. I really appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate even more the fact that you brought me on here so I could share all this. So thank you.
Thanks very much. Have a great afternoon. As a queer individual with colonial lineage, I want to first acknowledge the land upon which I live and work. Being from what is now known as Burlington, Ontario, I recognize the original ancestry of these lands as they span from Lake Ontario to the Niagara Escarpment and beyond. These lands are steeped in Indigenous history that benefits my community every day. The territory is mutually covered by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement between the Iroquois Confederacy, the Ojibwe, and other allied nations to peaceably share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. I would like to acknowledge that the land on which I stand is part of the treaty lands and territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit. The land dictates everything about our ways of being. Particularly, the land teaches us about fluidity. Concepts of the binary system and heteropatriarchy were imposed by the colonials who were, at the same time, removing children from their homes, families, and all that was familiar to them. These same children were divided by the only two prescribed binaries recognized by the settlers, and they were forced to conform to a performative, gendered falsehood. The land doesn't operate under binary thinking. It is diverse, complex, and unpredictable at times. Rather, the land holds us and all of our remarkable paths and identities. Every organism and spirit has a purpose. It is from this understanding that I strive to live and grow. Thank you for joining me today on the Becoming Baby Ready podcast. If you have a story that you'd like to share, or you know someone who might, if you're a professional who works in the capacity of helping people start and grow their families, and you identify as being a part of the 2S LGBTQIA+ community yourself, then please don't hesitate to reach out. We always have room for more stories to share, and there's always more learning to do.